Nearly 4 years after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, federal authorities are continuing to arrest rioters who took part in the violent insurrection. This week, a man from Florida named George Gonzalez was charged with multiple felony offenses, including charges related to assaulting police officers and destruction of government property. Now, to date, federal prosecutors have secured over 1,100 convictions related to January 6th, and additional arrests are reportedly expected. However, the time for applying justice and holding January 6 rioters accountable appears to be running out. During an interview with Time magazine released this week, President-elect Donald Trump said that one of the first acts of his presidency would be to pardon most of the Capitol rioters, saying it would happen, quote, in the first hour that I got into office, maybe the first 9 minutes, which means that the years of hard work by the Justice Department could soon unravel at the stroke of Donald Trump's pen. Joining me now to discuss the potential impacts is Anthony Coley, former director of the Justice Department's Office of Public Affairs. Anthony, so glad to have you with me. How do you think that attorneys within the DOJ, U.S. attorneys, are reacting to the pledge that Donald Trump has made to pardon January 6 rioters as soon as he gets into the White House again?
Charles, I got to tell you, when I was growing up, my mom had a copy of the Serenity Prayer in our living room. And do you remember the first line of the Serenity Prayer?
Yeah,
God
absolutely.
grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, right? And I think it's that mindset that so many AUSA's line prosecutors have when they hear Donald Trump's rhetoric. They are simply ignoring all of that, as they should, and focus on the cases and the work in front of them. I also think, Charles, that there is a clear acknowledgement that there is a difference between what Donald Trump says and what Donald Trump does. Just go back and rewind the tape, if you will, to Donald Trump's very first campaign, where he says, Hillary Clinton, we're going to lock her up. We're going to build a wall, and we're going to get Mexico to pay for it. We are going to eliminate the federal deficit. We're going to get rid of Obamacare and replace it with something beautiful, right? He has all these lists of promises, and he doesn't fulfill them. So I think there's a clear acknowledgement of Donald Trump's history in this regard.
Now, Anthony, you've talked to the Sunday morning saints, but now we got to talk to the Friday night friends. If you are still someone who is an AUSA and your responsibility is to continue to prosecute cases against January 6ers, and you hear that potentially in less than 2 months' time, all of your work could be just washed away because of these pardons, how seriously can you take going after these folks with respect to the investigations, the indictments, the prosecutions, and everything that goes into a case? How legitimate do you see your job as being? And if you're the communications person, which you've been, how do you sell that to the public?
Well, I think if you were one of these line prosecutors, you have to keep in mind the people that you're fighting for. And I'm reminded, Charles, that there were 5 law enforcement officers who lost their lives as a result of injuries sustained on January 6th. And I think the country owes them an aggressive prosecution. They deserve to be, have this case these cases fully adjudicated, and certainly people holding those perpetrators accountable. I would also say here, Charles, one other thing is that there is story after story of defendants who have seen the light, who have been working with prosecutors to hold other people accountable, who have acknowledged that Donald Trump lied to them, and they're trying to become productive citizens. And so I think between what I started with and this realization, I think that's what has got to keep you going as a prosecutor. You can't be so concerned about what Donald Trump may or may not do.
Now, Donald Trump has made a big deal about streamlining government efficiency. He's got Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy lined up with this Office of Government Efficiency to basically cut back the fat. At this point, how is it? I need your help to help me understand, how is continuing with these prosecutions only to result in pardons, or vice versa for that matter? How is this not a serious waste of government resources, particularly if within the first, as he said, possibly 9 minutes of his presidency, he erases all of the work that's done. I can't see that. Help me understand.
Yeah, well, listen, I can't see it either. I think what Donald Trump is really trying to do with floating these pardons is rewrite history, right? When you think about the whole what happened on January 6th, it is built on a foundation of lies. That the election was stolen, and we know it wasn't stolen. And I think that's what he's essentially trying to do here, to rewrite history, to shape the narrative. And he is essentially trying to potentially use this pardon power as a political tool. And I think that should concern all of us who care about the Constitution, who are pro-democracy, despite what our political affiliation may be.
You said a lot just in that last answer that I want to seize on. You said political tool and you said care about democracy. You're someone who has been on the inside, particularly from a messaging standpoint around the DOJ. Yeah. We know that the conversation around Donald Trump, Kash Patel, the FBI, the DOJ, there is an extreme concern that it will be weaponized in a political way to go after Donald Trump's political foes. If you're the communications director, how do you message and also steer the Attorney General to make sure that the DOJ remains an independent and democratic institution that is not subject to the political whims of the president?
Listen, I think this is a lost cause, just based on the people that Donald Trump has appointed here. I'll just start with the Attorney General nominee. She has a good resume, Charles. I don't take that away from her, but being an effective Attorney General requires more than having a good resume. It requires independence and judgment, and it requires an acceptance of what court rulings are, even if you don't agree with them. Pam Bondi is somebody who has embraced election denialism. And Charles, I got to tell you, and I know we're probably running short on time, is that 24 years ago tonight, Al Gore conceded to George W. Bush in that recount. I worked on that campaign. And it was tough for thousands of his supporters and his staff members. But that's what happens when courts rule. You accept the outcome and you move on with your lives. However disappointed you are, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General nominee, has not moved on. She has a stance that is even beyond what Attorney General Bill Barr embraced in terms of election denialism. So I'm very concerned about the people that Donald Trump is placing around him, because they have loyalty to him, and they're putting that above their loyalty to the Constitution.
Anthony Kohler, you have taken us to church, to history class, and to the DOJ all in one segment. Thank you again for your time tonight.